Conquer the Noise is a podcast produced by Unconquered, an independent agency challenging brand perspective through redefined content. This podcast is dedicated to telling stories of outstanding ideas and people who have found their way amongst the chatter. Hi everyone, this is Jonathan Hansen, your host of Conquer the Noise. Thank you for listening in today as we speak with Gene Foca, the CMO of Getty Images. I have a couple notes before we start. First, I'd like to make a correction. During today's conversation, Gene talks about the work of his colleague, Rebecca Swift. He mentions her PhD in anthropology, and in actuality, it's in commercial photography trends. And second, I'd like to put a call out for your help. Reviews are one of the best ways that we can grow our audience, so please head on over to the Apple Podcast app and leave a review. If you're interested in sending me a note or want to be on the show, you can email me at j@weareunconquered.co. And the last reminder, this show is recorded from my New York City apartment, so please bear with me as sometimes the noise from the city creeps in. Thanks, Gene, for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Gene, you're CMO over at Getty Images. I think a lot of people in the marketing world may be familiar with Getty, but if they're not, I would love it if you could just run through what Getty does and is.
Sure. So, for more than 25 years, Getty Images has been a visual content and technology company on a global basis. Mm-hmm. We serve the entire creative economy, and that spans from the entrepreneurial creative class. And we've actually just added to our family this past week with the acquisition of Unsplash. And that's definitely a component of our business that hits that entrepreneurial creative class. And then it spans to global small businesses and small enterprises through iStock, which is another one of our brands. And finally, large enterprises on a global scale through Getty. And we have the range of creative and editorial content that spans from imagery to vectors, videos, and illustrations. So we cover the full range of visual content needs across the entire creative economy.
Mm-hmm. So I when the opportunity came up to speak with you today, I got really excited for multiple reasons. One, I was a photographer for 12 years before filling my role here at Unconquered, so very familiar with Getty. Lots of my friends are either staff photographers or contributors to Getty. So it's a great opportunity just to get behind the huge shell of Getty and speak to people inside. And the other thing is I made me really excited is talk about sustainability, environmentalism in a visual sense. A lot of the topics we cover on the show usually are interviewing founders or people who have come up with disruptor services or products that are more environmentally friendly. So today I think this is a really interesting approach to talk about it in a way of visuals. And because, as you know, photography, imagery, illustrations all have a really powerful way of
huge impact.
Yeah. Of communicating with people, shifting perception, affecting people's personal identity, all sorts of things. And I think it's a really great opportunity to speak with you today. And one of the things that we were going to be really talking about in depth is the visual GPS report that Getty's been working on. So, for the listeners out there who haven't heard of this visual GPS report, what is this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking. So Getty Images, as you can imagine, has always been good at creative trends, creative insights, and forecasting. We've had almost since the inception of the company and the founding of the company, a very skilled creative team. And that's the team, by the way, that we refer to when we're talking about the people who deal with our contributors, our photographers, the people who deal with actually the creative that we license. We've always been good at providing insights and guidance to our contributor team. We even have cultural anthropologists on our staff. And we do that guidance in a variety of ways. Some of it is written insight. Some of it is insight that our team provides the contributors through actual workshops and sessions that they have throughout the year and globally for key contributor base. And it's really a fantastic thing to participate in. Those sessions range from global guidance that they provide as well as individual guidance for specific contributors. And so we've always done that well. But a couple of years ago, the CEO challenged us. Craig Peters challenged myself, because I oversee marketing, and Andy Saunders and Rebecca Swift on the creative team, to take what we do so well for the contributors and expand that and make it even more data-driven, and then be able to also apply it to industry. Industry segments, not just globally, but regionally, where we could really provide visual insight to those parts of our community in as effective a way as we do with our contributors. And so we launched Visual GPS headed into 2020. And the idea was very simple. Take three components: the expertise that we already use for our creative community, supplement that with quantitative global research, which is done in multiple regions of the globe across 13 languages, et cetera. And then also use our marketing data science team. We have a team of PhD engineers and data scientists who have built a Getty Images search trends tool to actually really mine the data that we have internally for both what has happened in the recent past as well as what is likely to happen in the future. And so what we've done is combine those three elements, which we're constantly building on, to now reveal insights and provide information to both contributors and industry throughout the course of the year, as opposed to just a static set of insights that might come out at the end of one year, which is what a lot of companies typically do, a top 10 list or a top 100 trends to watch out for, or that type of thing. We want to take it out of the realm of trends and really provide insight.
And so it sounds like this is going to be ongoing. So is this initiative that we've now built into the core business of Getty going forward?
Absolutely. And more, we are providing this insight in various ways. So obviously, our sales team is armed with a lot of this information, but we also push it out to our customers and our contributors through email newsletters and updates that we provide them through our Visual GPS and Creative Trends landing pages, which are part of our sites, and in our marketing itself. And so we're looking at a variety of touch points to get this information out, both to contributors and to the industry.
And so, I think it's interesting. So it sounds like you're pulling data or insights from three different areas that you outlined. And I'm curious, was it the internal search results that initially sort of start showing the interest or the need for something like this, or the visual demand, I guess you could say?
Well, it all really started with the expertise of our creative team, because many of them are and were expert photographers and videographers themselves. And then over time, there was this realization of, wait a minute, we have a tremendous amount of data, and we can now inform our expertise with actual data. And I think that really became, a very logical and natural hook. And then from there, we took that out of an informal process. And that's where our data scientists were really able to supercharge that effort a little bit.
So within everything, what are some of the I want to say the word trends, but what are you seeing, I guess, the demand or the need for as far as the types of visual imagery illustrations in regards to the research, sustainability, and people's desire to have a more sustainable lifestyle?
Well, that's a good question, and probably more complicated than we have time for. But nevertheless, basically, what we use is a structure that's both been identified and pulled from our research of four forces that have really had big impact on the visual world. And none of these, I think, are going to be super surprising to you. Realness, which is our kind of representation of the broad topic of authenticity, which is so important. Wellness, technology, and then, of course, sustainability, which is what we're here talking about today. And within the context of sustainability, not surprisingly, though, although perhaps to some, this topic has increased in terms of intensity during the pandemic. It has not lessened. And so we're finding, consumers are even more interested in discussing sustainability, focusing on companies that are focused on the broad issues of sustainability than ever before. And a lot of what we see in terms of the impact on visual imagery is just the need to get away from tropes and cliches. For years, the types of imagery that was used to represent environmental and issues of sustainability were things like, the polar bear on the melting iceberg and penguins and that type of imagery. And really now it's much more nuanced and subtle about that. It's about depicting green practices and zero waste practices in daily operations. And it's about how you represent clean energy as part of the actual world, as opposed to using specific symbols for those things. So it's an integration into daily life, not surprisingly, as opposed to just a focus on overt symbols. That's kind of the transition that we're going through.
Yeah, and I know you brought up realness as one, but we discuss, at least on the show, a lot about sustainability and its different forms. And I would almost say, even though realness, and as far as its application to authenticity and representation of people, I think that also really plays into sustainability in many ways, and how one how poor communities are having worse or greater environmental impact. And not only that, but just, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but just as far as identity and being able to see people who look like you doing an everyday life and not feeling ostracized, and more accepted, and seeing a more accurate representation. So I think that even though it's kind of categorized in its own thing under authenticity, I would argue that it almost spills over into the sustainability realm as well.
All of these issues overlap, as you're pointing out, and they impact each other. And it's both how we depict people, whether it's them walking or cycling to work, or how communities are coming together to solve issues related to climate change. But it's who we're depicting, and making sure that people see themselves and real representations of themselves instead of cliches and tropes. And that's a lot of what our creative team and our visual GPS is designed to help our clients and our contributors do better.
So, one thing that I fear within the marketing world is that people just sort of hopping on the bandwagon of sustainability, and, creating products that simply can be marketed as sustainability or sustainable, whereas the rest of the business, may be falling short. And, I think there could be opportunity, or I'm curious to how, if Getty and your team is helping brands find images that's still authentic to them in a way that's still not something that's going to be overarching. And, I know that's more of a consultation role, but I was just curious how that plays into, helping clients maintain like an authentic voice when they're finding imagery.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, it's increasingly important that brands are really, really careful with their reputation and their value proposition, and that they make sure not just their words and their spokespeople, but their visual representation portrays their brand, their service, their product and business accurately and authentically. Mm-hmm. And when a company of repute doesn't, a single image, coffee cups and waste and that type of thing in the background can begin to cloud people's image of a brand or service. And so selecting that imagery very, very carefully is important. And so when we work with our customers, we try very, very hard to guide them in the right direction. We often involve with our larger global customers members of our creative team so that they can get real specific guidance in our research team to help them choose imagery that's realistic and really supports their proposition in the right way.
Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of great insights and research into in the visual GPS report. And truthfully, I've been referencing it for just some of my own writing, some op-ed pieces I've been working on, just because I think there's just it had such a broad, I think, focus as far as 10,000 people across 24 to 26 different countries. I think that's a pretty great lens to view and sample and to use to support other research ideas and thinking. And one of the things that was talked about on there was the consumption conundrum. The consumption conundrum. That's a mouthful. Where people want to think of themselves as sustainably minded, but then there's this idea of convenience and how convenience trumps everything else. So I'm curious to what you've seen there, and what you think or how you think we can move beyond this.
Well, there's a lot in that. So
yes, there is.
No doubt, Jonathan. So first of all, our visual GPS tells us that 81% of people out in the world, and not just North America, expect companies to be environmentally aware in all of their communications, advertising and practices, et cetera. So most of Americans, in particular, have awareness of the environment growing. Other parts of the world have always had a heightened awareness about issues related to the environment, sustainability. And when you take the issue out of the political realm, people are united by quite a bit. And the pandemic, as I said, has largely not lessened people's views about sustainability, but the intensity has actually grown. So 91% of our respondents today said they believe that the way we treat our planet now will have a large impact on the future, compared with 92% of those surveyed in July 2019. 69% of the respondents today said they do everything they can to reduce their carbon footprint, right? So that's an increase of 63%. So these are just indicators of what consumers out in the world expect us to do as companies. But what as companies we really need to do is each focus on those aspects of our business that have a powerful impact on the environment, and do what we can to cut down on that impact, right? So it's less about coming up with specific timelines and targets from my point of view, and it's more about making steady progress to improving your impact on the environment.
Yeah, we're big over here, at least we're big proponents of the idea of like every 1%, the small amounts of change on a global scale can reap huge benefits, instead of just having to completely just revamp everything overnight. And I definitely agree with that on like the personal scale. But in terms of some of the huge corporations that exist, sometimes it seems like 2030 pledges, 2040 pledges, it almost seems like it's too long. And I'm this isn't
well. It is, as is the case for a lot of change that we would like in society. I think, and this is where focus on a lot of these societal issues and sustainability is so different from country to country. Certainly in the US, I have found typically that big change happens when a majority of consumers and people are willing to take meaningful action with their purchases and their investment dollars. That's the language that companies understand. And I think many consumers talk about change, at least here in the US, but they don't necessarily act with their dollars and their purchasing power. Right? So that's the first thing. Conversely, I think companies respond to changes in purchasing behavior. So historically, in my opinion, consumers are the ones that lead companies to change. And I think 2020 couldn't possibly be a better example of consumers and people at large in society driving change, certainly in America, on a variety of issues. And so we're trying to lead the conversation with our imagery and our authentic voice around how people, events, and the environment should be represented authentically. But my experience is that companies implement change when their bottom line requires it. And I think the reason why these pledges and these commitments take so long is that meaningful change in companies often requires time. You've got boards involved. You've got to bring your staff along. These kinds of systemic changes often require process change and large investment decisions and near-term expenses that impact short-term profitability. And those types of decisions that are meaningful and impact a company's financial status, as well as how they recruit and retain employees, frankly, take time to implement and to sustain and truly be committed to.
We've been talking a lot recently about the idea of ethical consumerism, purchasing with the intent of choosing brands that are making ethical decisions in their production, in their hiring, in their treatment of workers, supply chain, transportation, all the details. And as we were just discussing, convenience does trump a lot of this sometimes. And I'm curious to what you think as far as like the responsibility of marketers then is. We've been talking a little bit about like, does that mean then marketers and brands need to work together to help educate more and create, systems of accountability, create labels and packaging that are more educational. And I'm just curious what your thoughts on that. It seems like
absolutely. The responsibility is at least twofold, right? It's an education process, right? Where we, as a visual content company, our responsibility is to provide our clients and our partners who use our visual content with the kind of imagery that's going to promote change. And we have to make that imagery and videography and those illustrations available. And we have to, frankly, make them easy to find with our technology and easy to surface. And we have to arm our research teams with the right facts and support to make sure that they can represent the visual content in a way that will really have impact. And at the same time, it's our responsibility in industry to come up with responsible products and services and things that have a more positive impact on the environment. So it's both an education process and it's a matter of having the right products and services to provide consumers, right? And some of those things are short-term changes and are easier to implement, and others are long-term.
Yeah, and so I'm curious to
imagery matters, though. It does.
100%. I agree 100%. And I'm curious to I think oftentimes there's not necessarily a universal definition of sustainability, or there's not a standardization of what it means. So I'm curious to what does that mean then for when people go on to a website, for example, like Getty, and search sustainable imagery? Like, what are they going to see?
Well, you can go on Getty Images right now or iStock right now and use a variety of general terms, and you'll see what you come up with in versus what you expect. And I think what we try to do is provide our customers through our technology with like phrases and filters to help refine those searches to find exactly what they're looking for. I think frankly, a very broad term like sustainable, everyone's going to fill that vessel with exactly what's in their head. So typically, the more specific you can be with the search, the better you're going to be in terms of finding exactly the imagery, the illustrations, and the videography that applies to your use case and your need. And if you happen to be a large customer who works through Getty Images, you're probably going to get support from our research team, and of course our customer service team is always available on both iStock and Getty to help customers find imagery.
So I think ultimately it sounds like this is a big topic that matters to the average American consumer, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like why you think it's suddenly becoming such a big deal. Like you hinted on a little bit how 2020 we really saw a huge shift in change. Coronavirus, the social issues around race bubbling up again after the death of George Floyd. It seems like these events all sort of hyper sped a pre-existing trend. And I'm curious if the visual GPS reporter in the research or the discussions it was having with those 10,000 people, some of them aren't in the United States. So those things definitely change and shape that. So, I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
So, you hinted at this earlier about the overlap between all of these issues, and there's no doubt that there's change throughout the generations, whether you're talking about boomers, millennials, et cetera. And younger generations have a shifting set of priorities versus say boomers. And the types of things that motivate millennials as a big group, as an example, are broader, and they tend to be as much motivated by working for organizations and companies that are mission-based and socially conscious as they are about profits and making a great salary, et cetera. And increasingly, the expectation on the part of professional staff is that those things can work together and complement each other. And of course, we know as leaders that a more representative staff and a more representative management team will provide a greater diversity and inclusivity of thinking. And that's how these issues and change related to these issues really takes hold in a company. It's when you have inclusive thinking, inclusive processes, you have a representative staff, and you get new thinking into organizations, and you begin to drive change, and you realize that a lot of these issues overlap once you have that representation and that kind of inclusive thinking.
That's actually that's a great way to say it. I'm curious to how long it takes, and this isn't necessarily pertains to your report. This is more or less just my own thinking here. I'm curious to how long it takes imagery, or how many times it takes people to see images to start, taking them in and start affecting the psychology and decision making, right? And in the report, it talks a little bit about like the visual evils of like plastic straws and water bottles, and you talked a little bit about that earlier. So I'm curious to know, when I think about this, like if we start introducing other imagery that's outside of that, can we help? Can we educate people that way, right?
Absolutely, we can. So certainly in today's world, a single image can signal that a brand or a company is not really serious. So there's no doubt that consistency of message matters. And there's no doubt that a single image can have an impact. And just as we have educated people with the negative, we can educate people with the positive. So our updated visual GPS shows that people believe the best ways of making a positive impact on the planet are to recycle, right? So showing that 78% believe that. So showing that in the imagery in an authentic way is really important. Stopping the use of single-use plastics, really important. So we can begin to educate people through visual imagery about not using single-use plastics, using environmentally friendly products, and using renewable energy sources for both home power as well as commercially. Really, really important. And it can have an impact just by showing a single image. Now, certainly, cadence and frequency in marketing and communications has always been part of the formula. But you can have an impact right away with your choices.
And so do you think, like, I hate to say this, but a lot of times, this is my career as a photographer, editors in publications or an advertiser don't always necessarily choose the best photos. And that's just personally speaking, my own bias for my own work back then. So is there a process when people come to the site, if they need help from a brand and they're trying to like find the best type of photo or imagery to represent the story, the issue, what have you, that you're offering to help sort of handhold there a little bit?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, we have, most good organizations have a customer service team, but we have the best customer service team in the business. They've been at it for a long time, and they're not just equipped to provide basic customer service, but they can provide help as well and direct to the right professionals when it comes to imagery. And then we have really an industry-leading research team, and that research team provides our clients with really thoughtful research to help them find the imagery and videography and illustrations that they need to bring their brands and their communications to life in the specific ways, with all the rights protections and clearances and all the rest. And also just if you've ever heard Dr. Rebecca Swift on our creative team talk, both publicly as well as in sessions that she does personally with clients and their team does with clients, they provide our clients with a lot of forward-thinking insight and more nuanced insight about how to apply the imagery to their needs.
So you said she's a doctor. What kind of doctor is that? I'm just out of curiosity.
She has a PhD in anthropology.
Oh,
But
interesting.
she is also a creative professional.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting. And I know this on our side, we always try to find new talent that has a diversity or diversified background. I mean, anthropology and creativity, I think, are fantastic combinations, like sociology, creativity, especially when you're dealing in the world of marketing and influence and talking with people. And
yeah, well, Rebecca's one of the best in the business. There's no doubt.
And so with that, is she or you, how are you sort of educating your internal team then to provide maximum value? Because, things are changing quickly. Obviously your research is continually updating. So I'm curious how that translates then and gets to the rest of the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we do it in a number of different ways. So first and foremost, all of our teams work very, very collaboratively. So marketing with creative, with product, are constantly sharing this information together. So we have both internal sessions about the planning for what the next steps are in visual GPS, but then we disseminate the information internally. And we use that creative team to help us make choices for our own imagery in the marketing that we do. And we're very, very careful about the choices and the words that we use, certainly. But just with the internal professional staff, we have, I've been at a couple of big companies in my career, Jonathan. I worked for the old Time Warner. I spent nearly 4.5 years at Amazon. Fantastic, thoughtful, and highly capable companies. And I will say that Getty Images is one of the most inclusive places that I've ever worked, from all hands and open forums that are done on a regional basis, hosted by our CEO, involving all the management team, where anyone on the calls, no matter the level, no matter the position, are encouraged to ask whatever questions that they want to, as long as it's done respectfully. Nothing is out of bounds, and they will always get an answer, whether it's the answer they want or not. And we also have departmental level sessions, and I would say that the amount of sharing, both in terms of conversation and dialogue, as well as data that's shared with the staff, is really quite extensive. And there's an openness and a willingness to hear. And so the way we make change in our company, which I'm sure is not always on the timeline that everyone would prefer, or necessarily with all of the decisions that everyone on our staff would prefer, but the way we make change at our company is by sharing the information, making sure it's disseminated, and by getting feedback and having very, very open and regular dialogue.
So, I mean, you said you had a pretty impressive career. I'm curious to what inspired you to move to Getty, and take on this type of project.
Well, it was a unique combination of things from my point of view. I had always been, throughout my career, a customer of Getty Images, so I'd used the service, and there were a couple of specific things that really motivated me. So first and foremost, our editorial business is one of the best in the world, and I mean compared to anyone, any media company, etc. Which I have to say, starting as an outsider, surprised me somewhat. And again, always knew the quality of the materials, but the reality is that our photojournalists are literally the best in the business across the categories. Sports,
There's
news,
some fantastic photographers over there.
They're incredible. Unbelievable. And, it's like a who's who list of, Brett Sturton, John Moore, Al Bello, like the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
These are really unbelievable professionals. And so that was a real motivator for me. The high quality of the photojournalism, the editorial product, and the high level of integrity, because I came at Time Warner and Time Incorporated from a news organization. And so that was really attractive to me and intriguing to me. The other thing that was really, really attractive is the extent of the global reach, selling in over 65 countries around the world, having an ability to touch so many customers with such unique needs, really interesting and compelling to me. Then I think we have a very unique business model, because we value what our customers need across the gamut. So we have a free content business in Unsplash. We have an e-commerce driven business in iStock that provides customers who have the need for, quick friction-free service that's a little bit more of a value and easy to access. And then we have the highest end, greatest depth and breadth and quality and most complicated packages that you could imagine through Getty Images and our enterprise sales team, which is almost a visual content as service business. And so that business model was really attractive to me because it allows me to apply all of the skills I've developed over the years, marketing and media with Time Warner, e-commerce marketing through Amazon, all in one business model. And I think the capper for me was when I interviewed with Getty, the leadership that I met, the people who are going to be my colleagues, were truly great people, high integrity, a lot of experience, and a lot of passion about this business. I think is what sets Getty Images apart and makes it kind of a unique business, really attractive.
So, as we wrap, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things today and a lot of the new initiatives Getty's been going through. I'm curious what you're excited for. We're still kind of early in 2021. What are you excited about this year and beyond as you continue your career there?
So much, Jonathan. I mean, so first and foremost, I feel like I've been with Getty Images for going on 4.5 years now. And I feel like across the departments, we have the right team, the right organizational construct, and the right foundation in our visual content offerings for our customers to see really exciting, accelerated growth over the next several years. So that's an obvious thing to be excited about. I'm really, really hopeful and interested to see how we build on visual GPS in the first 1.5 to 2 years we did it and where we take it next. The organization is completely committed to this and to making this initiative as valuable as it could possibly be to our customer base. We want to make it the definitive visual content study on an annual basis so that when you or Lucy or anyone in the world had a question about visuals, they would not only know to go to Getty Images, but that they could access some point in that visual GPS study throughout the year and get the information they need. That's our long-term vision and our long-term goal. So I'm excited to see where we can take that. And I think the final thing that I'm truly excited about is we are partnering more and more, not just with the traditional, leagues and events that are so important to the visual content that we provide to the world, but with organizations that are more mission driven, like Black Archives, or perhaps our work with Unilever and Show Us, where we're very, very focused on moving the world, and we mean that in a variety of ways. And the most important way we mean that is through our creative content and our editorial content. And I think the relationships that we are building and the projects that we're going to be unfolding are going to have great impact going forward. And so that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I love this research report. I have found it so useful. And it changed my perception of Getty. It definitely added a level of authority there. And I think I'm really excited personally just to see how that research continues to expand and help provide services for your clients in a way that actually trickles down in some sort of meaningful action, and in the ways that we had talked about a little bit earlier, as far as helping people, the visual impact as far as how it enters the psyche, helps decision making, helps see themselves in the world, and for me, that's what I'm really excited about, and see how that grows.
Yeah, well, look, we've always been a company that is driven by our creative and editorial expertise. Increasingly, over the past 5 years, we've been a company that is defined by that, combined with a heavy and smart use of data. And I think that that's what's going to set us apart going forward. It's the combination of those two things is very, very powerful, and I think somewhat unique to us in our industry.
Well, Gene, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me, and thanks for taking the time.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you all for listening in to my conversation with Gene. Next week, we have Jeremiah McElwee, Chief Merchandising Officer at Thrive Market. Thrive is a membership-based retailer offering natural and organic food products. I really hope that this has been an informative and inspiring podcast as you think about your business, self, and how it all rolls into creating a more purposeful and sustainable lifestyle. See you guys next week.